You know that famous purple wrapper, right? Of course you do. But what you might not know is the story behind it. It's not just about chocolate. It's this incredible tale of almost failing completely, coming up with a game-changing idea, and even trying to build a kind of utopia. It's a wild ride that totally changed how people thought about business. So let's dive into the history of Cadbury, drawing from the really fascinating work of Mohammed AbdEllah.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How does a tiny little family shop grow into a massive global chocolate empire? I mean, especially back then, with no internet, no global ad campaigns. Well, the answer is pretty incredible. It involves a crisis that almost wiped them out, a single invention that changed absolutely everything, and a really, really radical idea about how you should treat the people who work for you.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. We're heading back to 19th century Birmingham, and we're meeting our main character, John Cadbury. Now, you have to understand, chocolate back then wasn't what we think of today. It was often this kind of coarse, bitter drink. But John, he saw something more. He was on a mission, a simple one really, to make and share the absolute best cocoa he possibly could.
And things got moving pretty fast. At just 23, John opens his own shop and boom, it's a local hit. People loved it. Just a few years later, he teams up with his brother Benjamin, and they don't just start a company called Cadbury Brothers. No, they go and create one of the world's very first modern chocolate bars. I mean, think about that leap. They went from just selling drinking cocoa to creating the solid chocolate we know and love today. That was huge.
Okay, but you know how these stories go. That early success, it's rarely a straight line, right? They had all this momentum, they even moved to a bigger factory, but things were about to get really, really tough. The company was staring down a crisis that threatened to just undo everything they'd built. And here's the bottom line. It's simple, but it's brutal. For all their passion and their great ideas, sales just weren't happening. The business was bleeding money. And we're not talking about a bad quarter or a tough year. This was a deep, serious struggle that went on for almost 10 years. Just look at this. This chart really puts it into perspective, showing just how bad things got. Can you imagine that? For nearly a whole decade, the Cadbury family and everyone who worked for them lived with this constant pressure, this fear that the whole dream was just about to fall apart.
So, with the company on the ropes and his own health getting worse, John Cadbury had to retire. He handed the whole thing over to his sons, George and Richard. And what an inheritance, right? They were given a company that was basically in crisis mode. But they were also given their father's passion, and that turned out to be the most important thing of all.
And this is where everything changes. It's the big turning point in the story. George Cadbury, he's the one in charge of production, and he's totally obsessed with this idea of making the absolute best chocolate in the world. And he's about to stumble upon an invention that won't just save the company, it's going to redefine it from the ground up. Okay, to really get why this was such a breakthrough, you gotta understand the problem they were facing. So back in the day, raw cocoa had a ton of this cocoa butter in it that tasted, well, pretty unpleasant and bitter. So what did most chocolate makers do? They just dumped in a bunch of starches to kind of smooth it out and hide the taste. But George? Nah, he wanted something totally different. He was chasing after 100% pure cocoa with nothing added. And where did he find the answer? All the way over in the Netherlands. George finds out about this brand new invention, a cocoa press. It was a machine that could literally squeeze that gross, bitter cocoa butter right out of the beans. This was it. This was the key he'd been looking for. So what does George do? He buys the machine, of course. And just like that, their whole process changes. It's simple, but it's absolutely revolutionary. Squeeze out the extra butter, and what are you left with? 100% pure cocoa powder. No more starches, no more fillers, just pure chocolate flavor that the source material describes as being smooth as silk and sweet like honey. I mean, wow. And right there, that became their new identity. That one single machine, that one idea, completely transformed the business. All of a sudden, when you saw the name Cadbury on a package, it wasn't just chocolate, it was a guarantee of purity. This was the rock they built their incredible comeback on. So the company is finally making money again. Everything's stable. And you'd think the Cadbury brothers would just, relax and enjoy it. But nope, they didn't just want to make great chocolate, they set their sights on something way, way bigger. Building a better world for the very people who made their success possible.
And with that financial security came this incredible burst of creativity. They were one of the first companies to think, hey, what if chocolate was a gift? So they started making these beautiful decorated boxes, like heart-shaped ones for Valentine's Day. This is where iconic stuff like the milk tray comes from. See, they realized they weren't just selling a food item anymore. They were selling an experience. But honestly, their most radical idea had nothing to do with chocolate at all. George had this vision for a new factory, and he didn't want one of those grim, dark industrial buildings that were so common back then. He wanted to build it out in the country, with gardens and green spaces, a place where his employees could actually have a better quality of life. And that's exactly what they did. They built Bournville. And it wasn't just a factory, it was a whole community, a chocolate utopia, as it's been called, a place where workers and their families could live and work surrounded by beauty. It just goes to show you, the Cadbury family's values weren't just talk, they were at the absolute core of everything they built. So you take that amazing, pure product, and you combine it with this really powerful sense of purpose, and what do you get? You get a legacy that is unbelievably stronger than ever today. So let's fast forward and take a look at the insane scale of what that one-timey shop eventually became. Okay, just to give you a sense of that scale, try this number on for size. 350 million. That's how many bars of just one product, the classic dairy milk, are sold every single year. From a little shop that was about to go out of business to that, it's just an incredible testament to how much people still love this brand. And it's not just about the dairy milk, of course. That spirit of innovation is still going strong. You've got seasonal must-haves like the creme egg, you've got newer hits like Marvelous Creations, and you've still got the classics like Milk Tray. That product line that started with just one simple bar has exploded into this huge, diverse family of treats that people absolutely adore. So as we wrap this up, it really leaves you with a big question to think about, doesn't it? When you look at the whole Cadbury story, starting with a passionate founder, going through that near-death experience, finding a new life with this obsession over purity, and then building a whole community with a real sense of purpose, what is that secret ingredient? What really makes a brand not just successful for a while, but truly, truly timeless?